Good morning, it is 7 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Vision Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, a very good morning from me as well. A busy day ahead.
A sacked civil servant gets his say after the Prime Minister accused him of withholding information about Peter Mandelson's appointments.
If I had known before he took up his post that UKSV recommendation was that developed vetting clearance should be denied, I would not have gone ahead with the appointment.
The US Vice President heads to Pakistan for peace talks, but he might not have anyone to meet. Iran refusing to confirm if they'll attend or not.
Mobile phones will be banned in schools after an unexpected government U-turn.
Also today, groundbreaking new treatment is helping patients with bowel cancer. We'll be talking to one of them about how it changed her life.
And the King's heartfelt tribute to his mother on what would have been Queen Elizabeth II's 100th birthday. Good morning, thanks for being with us. It is a huge day, a difficult day ahead as well for the Prime Minister. The question of what he knew and when about the appointment of Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the US will again be under the spotlight.
That's because at 9 a.m. we'll hear from Sir Ollie Robbins, the sacked head of the Foreign Office Civil Service that Keir Starmer is blaming for keeping him in the dark. He'll be giving evidence to the Foreign Affairs Committee. Well, yesterday the Prime Minister denied misleading the House of Commons, saying he'd not have appointed Lord Mandelson if he'd known he failed security vetting.
There's a lot to unpack here. There's three key questions, I think, that need to be addressed. So just to run you through some of them and what we're expecting from Ollie Robbins. The first is, I guess, the process of the vetting. Who saw the security vetting and when? We're expecting Ollie Robbins to say that he didn't tell Keir Starmer, but he's also likely to say that he didn't see the formal recommendation either, but was just given a verbal briefing. Really, though, I think this is actually the key point here. Internal pressure. Was there pressure on the appointment? Did Ollie Robbins feel that it was all happening in an atmosphere where the decision could not be unpicked? And that is partly because of this timing. The appointment had already been announced. And as Sam Coates revealed on Sky yesterday, the Prime Minister was advised that with a political appointment like this guy, like Lord Mandelson, as in not a civil servant who'd already gone some kind of vetting, they should do the vetting before making the announcement, which he didn't do. Here's Keir Starmer.
The Foreign Office officials who made that decision did not pass this information to me, to the Foreign Secretary, to her predecessor, the Deputy Prime Minister, to any other minister, or even to the former Cabinet Secretary, Sir Chris Wormold. I found this staggering.
Knowing Peter Mandelson's history, going back now 30 years, and given what has been known, it's one thing to say, as he insists on saying, nobody told me. Nobody told me anything. Nobody told me. The question is, why didn't the Prime Minister ask?
Let's bring in our correspondent, Rob Powell. Rob, all eyes obviously on Ollie Robbins, 9 a.m. So it's going to be, really box office viewing, and we're building up to that. He's a civil servant. Typically, they kind of toe the party line. They don't get involved in the politics. Are we expecting that, or has he got an axe to grind?
Yeah, I think he'll be in this to defend himself. And I think what he's going to do is try and really retell the story of this whole fiasco. I think when it comes to the process of the vetting, he's going to say that this is about a recommendation coming to him. It's not a black and white thing. And then he put safeguards in place to try and offset the risks that were flagged. I think like a helpful way to think about this argument that we're probably going to get from Ollie Robbins is if you want to rent your house out to someone, you'll go and do referencing checks and credit checks and things like that. They all come back with a load of warnings saying, basically, don't give your house to this person. You can still go ahead and do it. It's your choice. You can put mitigation, safeguards in place, ask for more rent in advance, but it's your judgment, basically. And I think to sort of expand this analogy, you might think if the tenant that you're wanting to give your house to has already been kicked out of a couple of previous places and is quite well known for not always following the rules, you could probably advance the argument that you might not even need a referencing agency or a credit checking agency to tell you that you probably shouldn't be giving your house to this person. Now, I don't think Ollie Robbins will be as blunt as that, but I think that is the argument he is going to be hinting at, that the decision had been made, it had even been announced publicly, and that as a civil servant, in the face of this political decision being made, it was his job to make it happen, not to stand in the way of it.
I guess this is the thing, isn't it? Because if you think about it, it's not like the vetting process necessarily, and we haven't seen, obviously, but uncovered things that weren't known. He'd been sacked twice before. He had a relationship with a convicted paedophile, and he had a lobbying company with links to Chinese companies. So, you know, it'd been done, it'd been announced.
It's going to be interesting to see whether he is able to go into any of the details about why the vetting check failed. I mean, as our colleague Sam has been reporting, that he may not have even actually seen the vetting report. He was only verbally told it. But, you know, if he could come out and say, look, it failed because of these reasons, and those reasons were actually in the report that went to the Prime Minister around due diligence from the Cabinet Office, then he can precisely make that argument, that he believed that the Prime Minister was aware of these risks. The vetting check basically flagged those risks in a more formal way, and that is why he put stuff in place to safeguard and to offset it. The other thing I'd say is it's not been missed by a few people this morning that a month before this vetting check was taking place, Keir Starmer had given a speech where he talked about the civil service, some elements of the civil service being comfortable in the tepid bath of managed decline. That whole argument being that when the Prime Minister makes a decision and pulls a lever, for some reason Whitehall doesn't allow it to happen. Something goes wrong. Ollie Robbins was pretty fresh in this job by then, and the speculation is basically that his belief was that this decision had been made, it could not be unpicked, and rather than being the kind of Sir Humphrey coming in and saying, well, actually, I think you'll find that you can't employ him because of this, he had to make it happen because that was what the political masters wanted.
Rob, great stuff. Thanks so much. We'll be continuing to build up to Ollie Robbins in front of the Foreign Affairs Committee at 9 a.m. We also just had some jobs data from the government and a surprise improvement in the employment outlook. You remember last week we got GDP for the month of February, this is, so it's all pre-war, and that was better than expected. It came in at 0.5%. The expectation had been 0.1%. Well, unemployment, similarly, quite a big surprise. The forecast was 5.2%. It has fallen, the unemployment rate, to 4.9%. This is for the 3 months up until February. So, again, it's pre-war, but kind of speaks to that great shame almost, the irony that the month of February, it seems, was improving before the war began. The slight offset, you might say, although it depends, of course, who you're talking about. Those that receive pay rises will be pleased. Average earnings, including bonuses, again, pre-war, which is going to be inflationary, 3.8% in the 3 months to February. It was expected at 3.6%. Obviously, wage growth's something that can cause inflation. So that's a bit higher than expected, albeit obviously welcome for those getting the pay rises. But the headline here, unemployment back below 5%, 4.9%.
That is a bit of a surprise, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not what people were expecting at all.
No, forecast 5.2. But again, coming into this, then people suddenly wondering whether the GDP data last week was so far from what was expected, whether this could be far from expected, and it has been to the right side.
Well, Wilfers is saying that everything, of course, at risk of changing because of the war. Let's turn now, shall we, at two developments in the Middle East, because that fragile ceasefire between Iran and the US is approaching its expiry date. The US Vice President is expected to be in Pakistan today for another round of peace negotiations, but we don't know if Iran is going to turn up right now.
Let's bring in Cordelia Lynch, who's in Pakistan's capital, Islamabad, this morning. Cordelia, I guess I would frame this as people are expecting these talks to go ahead, not least if J.D. Vance is making the journey. Is that the expectation in Islamabad, or are they genuinely not sure if the Iranians are going to show up?
Good morning to you, Wilf. I think it's fair to say with every hour that goes by, there is more confidence that these talks will go ahead. There is some optimism, too, that some kind of agreement will be reached, but absolutely no guarantees. And that also doesn't mean that the agreement will be implemented. What we do know is that the Vice President, J.D. Vance, will be coming to Islamabad. There are reports that Iran's supreme leader has given approval for a delegation to come to Islamabad, but I think everyone's got a degree of whiplash over the past 48 hours around speculation of will they or won't they happen, these talks. Certainly, I think all parties want to give the chance for them to take place, still to be alive, but there's been a lot of rhetorical bluster. You've got both America and Iran accusing each other of violating the ceasefire. That expires tomorrow, and that's why we've got this kind of mounting pressure, really, around these talks taking place. At the core of everything is that stranglehold on the Strait of Hormuz. We know that energy prices have soared. It is a global crisis, and it's in both Iran and America's interest to try and resolve that to some extent. Iran obviously want an end to sanctions. America want the Strait of Hormuz to be reopened. There is a blockade, though, that is still taking place. I think there are many, though, thorny issues. Take us back to the talks here in Islamabad before. You'll remember they took 21 hours and ended without a deal. Both sides briefing why they felt the talks had broken down. You had Iranians suggesting that America wanted them to just hand over their enriched uranium, and their sense was that was just unworkable for them, that they wouldn't agree to it. So I think the most likely agreement, if one is to take place, is around the Strait of Hormuz. I think any really meaningful long-term agreement around enriched uranium from the people we're speaking to feels unlikely at this stage. But look, this is a wildly unpredictable war, and we've seen a lot of twists and turns. We have heard from the Parliamentary Speaker of Iran today, who has said they still have new cards in their pocket if conflict is to return, and that kind of looming threat, I think, remains over all of this. One important point to talk about is the internal conflict within Iran. You've got these negotiators, more pragmatists, if you like, that are willing to come to the table, willing to talk to J.D. Vance, to the envoys Witkoff and Jared Kushner, and potentially to Donald Trump, if indeed he ever turns up. But then you've got the hardliners that just don't see much room for negotiation here. I think perhaps right now, from where I'm standing, the biggest winners in these talks, if they are to take place, is Pakistan. They've been the unlikely mediators in all of this. This is a country that doesn't recognise the state of Israel, one of the key players, of course, in this conflict, a country that secretly developed nuclear power itself, something that America has accused Iran of course. But they are speaking Trump's language. They have skillfully reached this point where they are hosting, potentially for a second time, these enormously consequential talks, and they've been very deft at trying to get people to the table, trying to avoid upset, and that's why it's so difficult to get any sense of what we can expect over the next few days. But I think if talks are happening, it's unlikely today, more likely tomorrow.
Cordy, as always, thanks so much.
It's been quite interesting to look at the, I think, unexpected social media game of Iran recently. And the Iranian ambassador to Pakistan has posted on social media to say, it's a Pride and Prejudice joke, it's a truth universally acknowledged that a single country in possession of a large civilization will not negotiate under threat and force. This is a substantial Islamic and theological principle I wish the US would have perceived. So it's a kind of play on Jane Austen.
I actually still don't quite get why it's a play on Jane Austen, but I think it's quite convincing. It's a legitimate point.
Yeah, it's the opening line of Pride and Prejudice, a truth universally acknowledged. That's very fair. But they've had these kind of Lego memes on social media as well, where they've been getting almost like kind of, I mean, it's not official Iran accounts, but like outriders to post Lego memes mocking Donald Trump.
Which I've seen some of those, and obviously everyone told me it was a Pride and Prejudice joke this morning. I didn't know. But I thought it was still quite compelling, which I guess harks back to Jane Austen was pretty good at what she did.
Yeah, there you go. There we go. There's another story that I just wanted to bring you as well, because I feel like if the Mandelson story wasn't such a big deal, we would be reporting an awful lot on this, because it's quite a significant U-turn from the government, actually. Schools in England are now going to be forced to ban mobile phones. It's after a U-turn from the government. And at the minute, there is guidance, but head teachers don't have to follow it. The change is likely to come in, and MPs expected to vote this week on amending the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill, which would see it become a legal requirement. Of course, it's a live topic for the government. Later today, some key figures are going to be getting together from some of the big social media companies to give evidence to Parliament about the impact screen time has on children.
Mickey Carroll has more, speaking to Liz Kendall.
It's no secret that the government's planning to make some very big changes to how young people live online. The question is, who's influencing the changes that they'll make? Tech executives from companies like Roblox, Snapchat, TikTok, Meta have all been hauled in front of MPs 3 times in the last 2 months alone to give evidence on different aspects of online harm. This morning, they're giving evidence on screen time and the impact too much phone use can have on young people. There are campaigners who say that those companies have a vested interest in watering down the government's more dramatic plans to protect young people online, things like blocking all under-16s from social media. But the Technology Secretary, speaking to me here outside a conference in Sussex on the childhood in the age of AI, says she's relying on the government's public consultation on the issue that's already attracted more than 50,000 responses to make a decision. But no matter what, there'll be drastic changes brought in, maybe even by the end of the year.
Of course, we talk to those companies, but we also want to say to them, we had a pretty blunt conversation, myself and the Prime Minister, with the companies just last week to say, what more are you going to do? Because you say you're making these changes, but parents don't feel it's enough. So we had a pretty honest conversation about it, and I'm sure MPs will continue to take evidence for them too.
But this isn't just a societal problem. This kind of content is banned on all major tech platforms. And the people trying to stop it from spreading say now that they need help. So I asked the Technology Secretary what she's planning to do about it.
It's precisely because we want and need to do more that we're having this very short, sharp consultation, that we'll bring forward our proposals before the summer. And we've already taken the power to implement our decision. And I intend to do that by the end of the year.
Well, let's get straight into our government interview, shall we? We're joined by the Energy, Security and Net Zero Secretary, Ed Miliband. Great to have you with us. So it's a big day today, 9 a.m. So Ollie Robbins is going to be giving evidence to this committee. Keir Starmer says he's furious with him. Do you feel furious with Ollie Robbins?
Can I just say up front, Sophie, the most important thing to say is Peter Mandelson should never have been appointed to the job. This has been a very damaging episode for the government. I'm sure Keir feels that himself, and lessons need to be learned about who gets appointed to top jobs and indeed about the process of vetting. Keir Starmer's taken responsibility for this error of judgment in appointing Peter Mandelson, and he's been right to do that. Look, on the ins and outs, we'll obviously have to wait to see what Ollie Robbins says. Look, I know Keir Starmer well. I think it was clear from what he said yesterday. On a number of occasions, people were just simply not told. I mean, in fact, people were not told. As I understand it, Ollie Robbins' whole argument is it was my duty not to tell people. We'll see what he says. So on the sort of fundamental question, which people have been saying for the last few days, did Keir Starmer knowingly mislead the House of Commons? He obviously didn't, because he wasn't told that Peter Mandelson had failed the vetting.
I understand your argument about the fact that Keir Starmer wasn't told, and it does feel like that is what Ollie Robbins is going to say. But we also understand that he's going to probably make the case that it was done in an atmosphere where there was an expectation that this decision could not be unpicked. And as you said, this is because the appointment had already been announced before the vetting.
Which was the usual
happened.
process, actually.
Well, it was, but then Simon Case, as we understand it from Sam Coates, also told Keir Starmer that because it was a political appointment, as in it wasn't another civil servant who'd already gone through vetting, that they should do the vetting before announcing it.
Well, Chris Wormold looked into this and said the opposite. I mean, just on the point about the sort of rushed atmosphere that people are saying, Ollie Robbins, by the way, I know Ollie Robbins. He's a really decent guy. So, let's see what he says. He was asked about this question of a rushed process at the Select Committee last year, and he said that the UK SV undertook the process in precisely its standard way, doing all the checks we'd expect to do, and we had ample time to assess and decide on the basis of the work.
Just to say, my argument isn't that it was rushed. My argument is that Keir Starmer knew this stuff before, right? We knew that Mandelson had been sacked twice. We knew that he had a relationship with a convicted paedophile. We knew that he had a lobbying company with links to Chinese firms, right? We knew this stuff.
So you're saying he should never have been appointed?
Yeah.
And I agree with you.
But that's Keir Starmer's fault, isn't it? Not Ollie
Well, yeah, and
Robbins'
he said that.
But look who's lost their jobs, right? The Chief of Staff has lost a job. Ollie Robbins has lost his job. The Head of the Civil Servants has lost his job. The Director of Communications has lost his job. Should Keir Starmer lose his job?
I don't think so.
He was the one who made the error, as you admit.
Well, I don't think so, no. Obviously I don't, because I think Prime Ministers make errors. Prime Ministers are fallible. Prime Ministers are human. As you know, I steered well clear of Peter Mandelson when I became Labour leader in 2010. But people make mistakes, and the point about a mistake is, do you fess up to it and say, yeah, I made an error? And he couldn't have been. He's been clear on a number of occasions, including yesterday in the House of Commons. But look, I don't want to say to your viewers this isn't damaging, or we've got the war in Iran, we've got everything else going on. I'm trying to protect both our energy supplies and prices and all of the which I know we'll get to. But so I'm not coming on here and pretending it's all fine or it's not damaging. Of course it's damaging.
You said that you stayed clear of Peter Mandelson when you were Labour leader. What went through your mind when you saw he'd been appointed as US ambassador?
Well, that it could blow up, that it could go wrong.
Did you say that to anyone?
I had a conversation with David Lammy about it before the appointment, and I said I was worried about it. I do want to say one thing, though, which is...
What did David Lammy say then?
Well, I think he was worried about it too. Look. I think I do want to say one thing.
People were worried.
Sure, but of course, and look, a judgment was made. But look, I just want to say one thing about this, which is Peter Mandelson was a very familiar figure in the sort of 30-year history of the Labour Party, and it's almost like that familiarity kind of meant that people sort of... It's almost like his flaws and so on just got almost sort of faded into the background, and that was obviously wrong.
So Keir Starmer just wasn't listening to people like yourself, like David Lammy, like other people who were raising concerns. That was the issue.
He made a judgment. Prime Ministers make judgments, and sometimes they get those judgments right and sometimes they don't get them right. I will say, on the big fundamental question of this war that has happened, and Keir Starmer made a really hard, the fundamental judgment of a Prime Minister, which is not to get into that war. So he's human, he fessed up.
Let's talk about energy.
Yeah.
You're here with a renewable energy announcement. What is it?
Well, we've had 2 fossil fuel crises in the last 5 years. Russia invading Ukraine, now the Iran war, sort of prices spiking and businesses and families affected. There is one cause of this, which is that we are subject to these global fossil fuel markets that we don't control. And my argument today is there is only one answer, which is to drive further and faster for clean power. And that means more renewables and nuclear. It means giving people the opportunity to have heat pumps and electric vehicles and driving that across our economy, because that is the way we protect ourselves as a country. And, some people have said, are we going to back down on our mission? No, we're going to double down on our mission, because it's even more relevant in today's world and given what is happening with global events.
It's interesting you're saying double down, because there has been speculation that actually like net zero is good for the good times, but at the minute we also need to look at oil and gas as well. Rachel Reeves has said that, you know, looking at the quickest way to bring on stream more oil and gas is right. She wants to help companies have the confidence to exploit those resources.
The North Sea...
Like a bit of a split now.
No. The North Sea is a really important resource, and we're going to continue to use it. I'm not one of those people who say we should turn off the taps overnight, nor am I one of those people who says we can drill every last drop, as the Tories in Reform would say.
If there's new drilling, would there be new drilling in the North Sea?
We've said, yeah, there will be tiebacks, or so-called tiebacks to existing...
There will be new
tiebacks to existing field, yeah, and it's...
That isn't a U-turn.
No, there's a total mischaracterisation. There's been this total mischaracterisation of our position, which is somehow we want to turn off the taps. We've never said turn off the taps, but ours is a pragmatic sense.
I thought you didn't want new drilling in the North Sea.
No, we've said, well, this is why it's good I'm on your programme. Yeah. Our position has always been a pragmatic, sensible position that says we don't want to turn off the taps, but we're not going to extract every last drop.
I know that, but are you ruling out new drilling in the North Sea?
No, I've never ruled it out.
So new drilling licences in the North Sea?
We made an announcement last November, which is that we would enable tiebacks, so-called tiebacks, which is, we said in our manifesto, we'll keep existing oil... Let me make the point. Existing oil and gas fields open for their lifetime, and then we would have so-called tiebacks, which is production, which links back to those fields. That was an announcement made last year.
What about...
I think it's important, this.
No,
can I just say why it's important?
Yeah, you can.
Because there's been a total and willful mischaracterisation of our position. Wait one second, by our political opponents. Look, our position has always been a very, very sensible position, which is we say, yes, we're going to use this resource, but what we're not going to do is drill every last drop, which will be a climate disaster for the country and for the world. No one's saying that. They are saying that. They absolutely are saying that. That's exactly what the Tories and Reform said.
You don't want new drilling in the North Sea, new licences for drilling in the North Sea?
Well, we're not going to have new exploration licences, no. That's the point about our position. We've said we won't have new exploration licences
but you will have
to explore new fields.
Final question.
Yeah.
Rosebank oil field, Jackdaw gas field. What's your inclination? Are you going to approve
I can't talk about my inclination. We've got a proper planning process, and as you would expect, we're going to look at all of the facts, which is what I've got to do as the decision maker, and come to a view.
OK. Ed Miliband,
thank you
very much indeed. Ed Miliband speaking to us there.
Very interesting stuff on the North Sea there at the end, but that's not the headline from that interview. I thought that was absolute box office. There was a moment in it where he decided to finish your question and said, what you're asking, Sophie, is did the Prime Minister make a mistake? And then he answered his own question himself. And he said, I steered well clear of Peter Mandelson when I became leader, went as far as to suggest that he and the then Foreign Secretary David Lammy agreed on that. I saw that as him throwing the Prime Minister under the bus.
Well, I think what is pretty clear is Ed Miliband, and I think many people in the Labour Party, had concerns about the appointment of Peter Mandelson, and it really does show, I think, that it is all coming up for the 9 a.m. evidence from Ollie Robbins, who Ed Miliband there said that he'd worked with before, he respected, is going to be so important.
I think you're underselling your box office interview there, because when the Prime Minister is in a moment of peril and you are sent out as his ally, you don't mention that you and the former Foreign Secretary had concerns about the appointment. So when you take it all in consideration and you step back from it, I actually gasped. I genuinely gasped when he said that David Lammy had concerns as well.
Yeah, it was interesting. And he said that he raised the concerns with David Lammy, Foreign Secretary, he said, asked what David Lammy's response was, and he said that he had concerns as well.
And I thought it was, very, very significant. We'll analyse more of it to come. As we said, Ollie Robbins to come at 9 a.m. as well. After the break, we're going to be talking about satellite coverage in war zones and the importance the private sector is playing in order to allow countries to stay connected at war.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be allowed to warn.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
Welcome back. Well, when the war in Iran broke out, many ships in the region found their navigation systems had failed, reporting vessels in erroneous locations like airports, nuclear power plants, and even on Iranian soil. It was a result of GPS signals being jammed and spoofed. It's a common tactic used in war zones to disrupt the paths of drones, missiles, and other GPS devices. Commercial ships weren't the target, but they were affected. At least that is the assumption. Let's talk about all of this and connectivity during wartime more broadly. Susie McBride, I'm delighted to say, joins us. She's the Chief Operations Officer at the satellite company Iridium, Chief Executive at Iridium. Great to have you with us. Just quickly summarise for us. Iridium is a satellite company that many people might think of Starlink. They don't know Iridium, but equally you can reach the whole world with your satellites.
Yes, we were actually one of the first global satellite systems and communication systems that we cover pole to pole, and 66 satellites that are in a low Earth orbit. And we do telecoms, so any kind of communications, IoT, aviation, shipping, obviously is a big one too.
So when we say the ships were, getting their signals jammed in the Strait of Hormuz during the last 6 weeks, was that targeted and intentional? And who was doing the disruption? Was it the West or was it Iran?
Yes and yes. There's a lot of, it's really easy to jam a GPS signal. GPS is, many, many years old, and it's very simple to jam, and we rely on it so much, especially the ships do, for their navigation. So you can both jam it and also spoof it, which is also important, so they can actually make a ship think they're in a different location.
But was that being done by the West and its allies, or by Iran?
I can't say. I think both sides have technologies to do that. It's a very simple thing to jam.
And what is the solution?
Well, we actually at Iridium have a new system that's out there now. It's using our satellites. The GPS signals are really far away, about 20,000 kilometers from Earth. And so trying to hear that signal with all the noise, that's why it's easy to jam. So on our system, we're closer and we have a higher power. So you can actually get that signal to your ship faster and hear it. And so what's happening is a lot of these ships and solutions, they want to have multiple solutions. They want to be able to look and say, is my GPS being jammed or am I being spoofed, and having another signal to be with it. And so that's what we provide, is a secondary link.
Presumably you guys also have better information than most on the scale of traffic in the Strait of Hormuz and whether it has picked up at all in the last few days or the final week of the war to date. Has it or not?
No, you can absolutely watch and track all the ships that are sitting there. You can see them sitting in port and if they're moving or not. And so I think it's kind of been similar as it's been recently, kind of everyone waiting to see to go through.
As we all talk about cyber hacking, as we see in action in the wars you're just talking about, do we need to be a little bit more worried about the ability for bad actors to hack communication devices and others of all sorts of commercial transport?
Yes, because what people don't realize is GPS is obviously for position is important, but timing is the other part of a GPS signal that a lot of our telecom systems rely on. And so it's really critical to have an alternative solution to do both of those, because you want to make sure all of our infrastructure, power grids, telecommunication systems, our trading. You can imagine how important timing is when you're doing on the trading on the stock exchange. So it's super important.
Finally, I wanted to ask about connectivity in places like Iran or Ukraine, for example, with much coverage of Starlink helping them stay connected. If you wanted, could you connect all the phones in Iran quite easily?
Yeah, I mean, we actually have communications that we do already. So a lot of those, in fact, critical communications are using Iridium, even like within the ships. You know, the ships are there. They need to also communicate as well. And so we also provide that connectivity for them and ensuring that everyone can get those information out.
But when we talk about the citizens of Iran not being able to get messages out, is that something quite easy to rectify?
It is. I mean, it is with satellite communications, absolutely.
So why have we not done that?
Well, they have to have access, and so and make sure that they do have connectivity to those systems. It takes a while to. Now we're developing a direct-to-device solutions. Those will come in the coming years. They're not there today.
Okay, Susie, thanks so much for joining us. Really interesting conversation.
Thank you.
Great to have you with us.
Well, look, we're going to return to the story of the day, the mounting political pressure on the Prime Minister and, of course, the day of evidence from the man he sacked at the Foreign Office, Ollie Robbins, in the last half hour. And Miliband has said that he raised concerns with David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, over the appointment before it happened. We can now speak to the former number 10 Director of Communications to Sir Keir Starmer, James Lyons. James, great to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Just want to start on Sophie's interview just there with Ed Miliband. I mean, he very clearly said he had concerns before the appointment. He raised them with the Foreign Secretary. Is that a calculated attack on the Prime Minister?
Well, look, if I was sat in Downing Street with my old hat on, I'm not sure I would see that as an entirely helpful intervention. But, I think the truth about Peter Mandelson and his relationship with the Labour Party is it's complicated.
What will be going on in number 10 right now, then, do you reckon, if you were in there?
Well, look, I think they might be trying to get hold of Ed Miliband's spads, but who knows? He may have agreed. He may have told them that's what he was going to say when he was sent out. So we just don't know.
I mean, that's pretty interesting. Get hold of him to say what? I mean, what can they say to him at this point? It's not like the Prime Minister's in a powerful position to tell him don't do further interviews or change what you just said, or is he?
No, I think, but look, they'll say, look, I'm not sure that was entirely helpful, and he's obviously got a full round ahead of him, so an exciting day in prospect.
How would you characterise the Prime Minister's position at the minute? Is this, is it a case where the Mandelson stuff is kind of priced in with Keir Starmer, so this isn't going to move the dial, or actually is this the kind of incremental issues that mean Keir Starmer's position could be seriously under threat at this point?
Well, look, we were told in the run-up to the Prime Minister's statement yesterday about how angry he was, how furious he was at not being told. And this is one of those rare instances, actually, in a kind of a Westminster row where the facts are not contested. It is clear that the Prime Minister wasn't told, and his opponents who were suggesting that he had misled or the House or lied about what he'd been told have been proved wrong in spades, actually. But we were told, we were going to see a very angry Keir Starmer yesterday. And instead of the Incredible Hulk, what we got was the Incredible Sulk from Labour MPs. It was a very, very quiet House of Commons yesterday. And I think, that will obviously worry number 10.
Can I just go back a step? I mean, again, all these details of who was told what, when, and internal processes, as Sophie and I have discussed, the standout points were obvious to all. He had connections to Chinese business, he had connections to Epstein, they went ahead with it. Is it not significantly incremental to hear that the Foreign Secretary, whose department ultimately appointed this, as well as an ally like Ed Miliband, senior government minister, had concerns?
Well, we already knew this because somebody had briefed that the Foreign Secretary had concerns some weeks ago.
But does it not
surely the
show
point
that
of having
the Prime Minister didn't just fail to get all the information at the right time, that he overruled people in relevantly powerful positions?
I don't think you can read that across at all, actually. I think what happened was Peter Mandelson went through the vetting process. I think everybody assumed that he had been cleared by the vetting authorities, when actually what happened was they raised some flags and Ollie Robbins clearly decided that he put mitigations in place. I think the key thing here comes down to, everybody is saying that due process was followed, but there wasn't a shared understanding of what the due process was. And look, I know it will seem absolutely incredible to your viewers that the vetting authorities could have raised red flags about Peter Mandelson, who was still appointed. But I have to say, you know, having worked in government, you soon learn that Yes Minister is a documentary, and the main difference between the thick of it and working in politics is, in the thick of it, people don't wander around going like, this is just like the thick of it all the time.
That's the only difference.
Pretty much. But look, also we are at half-time in this game of two halves, as the Prime Minister would think of it, you know, as a fellow long-suffering Arsenal fan. We've got Ollie Robbins coming on to give evidence this morning. But there is an extraordinary detail which has been suggested overnight, which is that Ollie Robbins himself didn't look at the full vetting report. He seems to have thought this information was so secret he couldn't even tell himself.
And what's the point of having the vetting process if people don't know about it?
It is bizarre, isn't it? And
it's like a tree falling in the woods and no one hearing it. Does it actually
fall down? The Prime Minister
down?
has said it was an error of judgment to appoint Peter Mandelson. That is clearly true. I keep thinking when Peter Mandelson talked about Epstein saying, you know, he had dog mess on his shoe that he couldn't get off. It felt like Peter Mandelson then walked that dog mess all the way through Downing Street. But I think it can also, you know, two things can be true. It can be an error of judgment on Ollie Robbins' part. And look, I've only ever heard good things about the guy. But it can be an error on his part not to have said, actually, there were some red flags and this is how we're dealing with it.
How damaging is it for the Prime Minister when you list all of the scalps that have fallen? The jobs around him, from civil service to SPADs, you know, you've left yourself, but not fired unceremoniously in the same way that Morgan McSweeney was. But there's been a lot, and it doesn't look great.
There has been a lot of churn. I think that it's safe to say. I would still say there are still some people in there who, you know, remain very close to the Prime Minister, have been there since the start. But this whole episode is obviously damaging. There's some great news today about unemployment coming down. That's not what we're talking about now.
We have covered it. Wolf's covered it.
But it's not what we're talking about now.
I hear you.
And, you know, I'm delighted to be on your show, but I wouldn't be here to talk about a fall in unemployment. So the problem is this burns up oxygen, it burns up energy. And it stops the Prime Minister and the government getting on the front foot. And the problem, again, is, you know, this is just the latest instalment. So we are waiting for the tranche of documents, the correspondence with Peter Mandelson between him and other figures in government to come out.
Great to have you on.
The unemployment data doesn't include the war. It doesn't include Ollie Robbins as well. He'll be
adding
+1
to
the data.
Brutal, absolutely brutal.
Next month as well.
James, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Later in the programme, we're going to be talking more about this to Lord Butler, former Cabinet Secretary. He'll give us his take on all of this as well. We're going to have a quick look at the weather now.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
So we are going to see a few showers at first on Tuesday, but these will gradually melt away, and with high pressure and charge, the weather should be largely settled for the next few days. It will be a bit windy for some of us, though. This morning, lots of us are enjoying already a fine, sunny start. There is a bit more cloud in the north, which is giving a few showers too. The cloud will then drift west, and by lunchtime, most of England, Scotland and Wales will be bright and fairly sunny. Temperatures should then climb to 16 degrees in the warmest spots, although I should say the wind will make it feel a little bit chilly.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Up next, we'll be talking about a new treatment for bowel cancer with very promising results. We'll speak to a patient who took part in an all-important trial. That's next.
With respect, Minister, answer the question. It's you.
Hello and welcome, I'm Cathy Newman.
So could the outcome of these elections be manipulated? New me, new show, new furniture.
Hard news needs a hard chair.
I feel like I'm in therapy.
Oh, there's room for two on this one.
Do you think people will take me seriously with my feet up?
Sorry, madam, but we're closing now.
Oh, sorry. Sofa sorted, let's get this show on the road.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
All alcohol products, not just wine, will have labels warning of liver disease and the link to fatal cancers.
Is it crazy? It's an industry worth around €14 billion a year. That's why Italy sees this Irish plan as such a threat. It's always instructive and occasionally entertaining to hear what Donald Trump has to say on the issue of Brexit.
She's got her own way of doing it, that's okay.
The job takes me to every corner of this island.
The rioting stemmed from a horrific daytime stabbing attack at a primary school in the city centre.
The scale of the rioting and the destruction it caused is pretty much unprecedented here in Dublin.
Jerry, any comments on the judge's decisions? Do you feel vindicated, Jerry? This is the end, the somewhat chaotic end, of a 52-day trial.
Micheál Martin could be set to head back to government with the Taoiseach Simon Harris.
Are you confident that you can now return as Taoiseach?
I'm cautiously optimistic and excited.
A mystery press conference hastily called. Leo Varadkar strode out and didn't disappoint.
I am resigning as President and Leader of Fine Gael effective today.
The people here sometimes feel they're somewhat neglected by the Irish government, to the extent that this place is sometimes known as the Forgotten County.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks, but none have ever been found.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland. Sky News, get the full story first.
We're trying to see as much as we can. We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News. People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
Been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Welcome back. Bowel cancer is one of the most deadly forms of cancer, which makes this next story pretty incredible.
So a trial led here in the UK found that treating certain patients with immunotherapy before surgery, rather than have chemotherapy after the operation, kept their cancer away after almost 3 years. It's a really exciting result. Medics say it could be a bit of a game changer in how we treat bowel cancer.
It's worth going over some of the numbers. Well, 46,000 people are diagnosed with bowel cancer every year. That's nearly 130 people every day.
The good news is that nearly 9 in 10 survive, but if they're diagnosed early, that's the key.
Bowel cancer is still the fourth most common cancer in the UK, and it accounts for 12% of all new cases.
Well, we can talk now to Felicity Hart, who's one of the patients who took part in this latest trial. Your first time on TV, we're so glad to have you with us. And it does sound quite exciting, the results here. So you took part in this trial after being diagnosed with, is it right saying, advanced bowel cancer?
It was early diagnosis.
Yeah.
I'm not sure at what stage it was, but I thought it was early anyway, yeah. So it's picked up soon. And when I was told that I had bowel cancer, obviously I was a bit prepared for it because I'd had a colonoscopy that hadn't been great. It was still a bit of a shock, but I hung on to the fact that they said it was treatable. And I also hung on to the fact that they told me about a trial that I could take part in, using a particular immunotherapy drug which had been very successfully treating more advanced cancers. So they wanted to have a look and see how that would impact pre-surgery on my sort of cancer. And I was told that the cancer fitted the genetic profile, which I didn't really know what that meant, but it seemed to be good.
And quite daunting to be taking part in something that's a trial. It
was. I mean, it was exciting. I was anxious, actually, having said I would do it, because clearly they always give you side effects, possible side effects that could take place, which I found sort of a bit worrying. It is something new. I knew it was a tried and tested drug, but it hadn't been used in this way before. So there were some anxieties about it. And there were times when I thought perhaps I should have gone straight for the surgery and not waited. I was worried about would it impact on the cancer if I didn't have surgery earlier? Those sorts of questions which I was able to discuss. Plus I had a couple of friends who also were diagnosed around the same time and weren't on the trial. And one of them had already had his surgery and gone home. So there were things like that going on. But I really wanted to do it, and blood tests weren't all good. My kidney functioning wasn't very good. There was concerns perhaps I couldn't do it. In the end, I did a 24-hour urine collection, and the results of that were good enough for me to go ahead. And I was so relieved. I really wanted to do it.
Yeah, this is it. It feels like all these decisions are so important when it is like, it's your life, right? So I can understand that being a source of anxiety, but also that desire to get on it. And talk to us about what's happened since then. What are your results like now?
I'm due to have another appointment in May. My results so far have been fine. There's been no concerns at all. I have felt very well looked after during the whole trial period. If I've ever been worried, which has been very rare and was only in the early stages, I was able to ring up and discuss things. So I've had no treatment since surgery, which is great.
So no chemo, it's nothing. No sign of cancer, is that right? And
yeah.
That's incredible.
Absolutely. So.
So is this something that you think will be rolled out more nationwide? Have you been told about that, or?
I haven't been told about it, but I do hope so.
Yeah.
It's a really wonderful way to be treated. I had no side effects from the immunotherapy other than a slightly dry mouth, which was nothing. And I've been very well ever since.
It does feel, doesn't it, like there has been such progression in how we treat cancer recently. And it's such a scary word, like, you know, but it's going to affect so many of us, right? We need to just kind of, I guess, stop being so afraid of it. But I guess, does it give you a reason for optimism that these scientists are making these amazing advances that, you know, 20, 30 years ago just wouldn't have been an option for people?
No, that's right. I mean, I do feel very privileged to have been on this trial, to be part of something that actually, you know, might benefit people in the future, which I hope it will. I hope it'll be part of people's, you know, part of treating cancer in the future, or certain types of cancer. For me, it certainly worked very well, and I understand everybody else on the trial has remained well too, which is great.
Felicity, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
You've had it feels like you have had like an amazing attitude to it as well, like, you know, talking about like how you felt privileged to be part of the trial, and you know, we're so happy that your results have been so good.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, today marks 100 years since the birth of Queen Elizabeth II, and the King has released a special tribute to his late mother.
It's a pretty personal message. He says that she would have been troubled by the times we live in.
Much about the times we now live in, I suspect, may have troubled her deeply. But I take heart from her belief that goodness will always prevail and that a brighter dawn is never far from the horizon. For, as a young Princess Elizabeth put it in her first ever public broadcast, aged just 14, we can each play our part to make the world of tomorrow a better and happier place. It is a belief which I share with all my heart.
Very warm tribute, as you might expect, on what would have been her 100th birthday. I was just thinking, had she lived today, she would have had to write herself a letter, wouldn't she?
That's a good point, actually.
I just thought of that.
I wonder what she'd say to herself.
Well done, you.
Yeah, shame about the rest of them.
Yeah, exactly. But very thoughtful from the King, of course, as you might expect. He's got a busy week ahead of him.
Yeah, we're going to have more on what the King had to say about his mother and the events taking place to celebrate today's anniversary with the royal commentator Jenny Bond, who'll be joining us at 8:30.
Does the King still write letters when you're 100? Or was that just the Queen? Or is it the monarch that does that?
I mean, this is a guess, but it must be...
Do you know he'll know the answer, Jenny Bond?
We'll ask Gemini. It must be. He must do, right? It's the role of the monarch, yeah?
Yeah, that's the #1 role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or one of the big ones.
We also just wanted to mention in the final minute or so of the show that Apple is changing its chief executive. Tim Cook is stepping down after nearly 15 years in charge. When he took over 15 years ago, the company was worth $350 billion. US dollars, so still pretty big. It's now worth $4 trillion. So his tenure will go down as one of the great leadership tenures, particularly from an operational side. He hands over to the hardware chief, John Turnus, which is also quite interesting because, you know, obviously Apple does lots of different things, but this is the part of the company that's done the watch, iPhone, iPad, AirPods. And in the era of AI, some might have expected them to go for someone more on the sort of software side of the business, but it's not. Anyway, congrats to Tim Cook on an amazing tenure. He's going to stay as executive chairman, so he's not departing entirely.
Not completely leaving. Yeah, big move there in Apple. We're going to be building up, of course, after this break, to the evidence by Sir Ollie Robbins. That's expected from 9 a.m. Could be pretty explosive.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter.
I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
Sophie and Wilf, good morning from both of us. Very busy day ahead.
A sacked civil servant gets his say after the Prime Minister accused him of withholding information about Peter Mandelson's appointment. Starmer defends his position, but his cabinet minister tells us he knew it would blow up.
If I had known before he took up his post that UK SV recommendation was that developed vetting clearance should be denied, I would not have gone ahead with the appointment.
I stayed well clear of Peter Mandelson when I became Labour leader in 2010. but people make mistakes.
The US Vice President heads to Pakistan for peace talks, but he might not have anyone to meet, with Iranian officials refusing to confirm they'll attend.
Also today, mobile phones to be banned in schools after an unexpected government U-turn.
And the King's heartfelt tribute to his mother on what would have been Queen Elizabeth II's 100th birthday. Good morning. Welcome to the programme. Well, the Prime Minister has another difficult day ahead as the question of what he knew and when about the appointment of Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the US is again under the spotlight.
That's because at 9 a.m. we'll hear from Sir Ollie Robbins, the sacked head of the Foreign Office in the Civil Servants Foreign Office, that Keir Starmer's blaming for keeping him in the dark. He'll be giving evidence to the Foreign Affairs Committee. Yesterday, the Prime Minister denied misleading the House of Commons, saying he'd not have appointed Lord Mandelson if he'd known he'd failed security vetting.
Well, we're going to get into the detail of what to expect today. But first, we just wanted to bring you comments from Ed Miliband, who's been on this programme in the last hour. And he was pretty... I'm trying to think of the right word. He was pretty open, should we say, about his own view of Mandelson's appointment.
I steered well clear of Peter Mandelson when I became Labour leader in 2010. But people make mistakes, and you know, the point about a mistake is, do you fess up to it and say, yeah, I made an error? And he couldn't have been, you know, he's been clear on a number of occasions, including yesterday in the House of Commons. I don't want to say to your viewers this isn't damaging, or, you know, we've got the war in Iran, we've got everything else going on. I'm trying to protect both our energy supplies and prices and all of the... Which I know we'll get to. But, you know... So I'm not coming on here and pretending it's all fine or it's not damaging. Of course it's damaging.
You said that you stayed clear of Peter Mandelson when you were Labour leader. What went through your mind when you saw he'd been appointed as US ambassador?
Well, that it could blow up, that it could go wrong.
Did you say that to anyone?
I had a conversation with David Lammy about it before the appointment. And I said I was worried about it. I do want to say one thing, though, which is...
What did David Lammy say then?
Well, I think he was worried about it too. Look. I think I do want to say one thing.
People were worried.
Sure. But of course, and look, a judgment was made. But I just want to say one thing about this, which is Peter Mandelson was a very familiar figure in the sort of 30-year history of the Labour Party, and it's almost like that familiarity, kind of meant that people sort of. It's almost like his flaws and so on just got almost sort of faded into the background, and that was obviously wrong.
So Keir Starmer just wasn't listening to people like yourself, like David Lammy, like other people who were raising concerns. That was the issue.
He made a judgment. Prime Ministers make judgments, you know, and sometimes they get those judgments right, and sometimes they don't get them right.
I mean, pretty jaw-dropping, I think it's fair to say, from Ed Miliband. We're just discussing this a bit more detail. But first, just to run through what to expect from the evidence from Sir Ollie Robbins. 3 big questions, I think. The first one is the process on vetting, right? Who saw the security vetting and when? We're understanding that, astonishingly, Ollie Robbins is going to say he didn't see the full recommendation either. He was just given a verbal briefing. In some ways, this could be the most important, though, internal pressure. Was there pressure on the appointment? In other words, is Ollie Robbins going to say it all happened in an atmosphere where it couldn't be unpicked? And if that's the case, this is partly why timing. The appointment had already been announced before the vetting. Now, the government is saying that this is just process. That's what always happens. But Sam Coates revealed on Sky yesterday the Prime Minister was advised to do the vetting before making the announcement, which he didn't do. I mean, look, it's going to be box office, I think, whatever he says, even if he does say that he didn't tell the Prime Minister.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting. Of course, that starts at 9 a.m. Let's talk about all of this with Rob, who... Well, Rob has joined us on set. Rob, in terms of... rather than look ahead to Ollie Robbins, let's look back to Ed Miliband. How significant do you think that was?
Yeah. I mean, what usually happens when a cabinet minister comes in and there's a massive, whopping great story that is basically outside of their brief, they are given the lines from number 10 on how to respond to those questions. And I think you can spot the exact moment that Ed Miliband decided to rip up those lines and just start speaking rather more frankly. And it was when he said, I steered well clear of Peter Mandelson when I became Labour leader. Now, what is that if it's not going, well, I wouldn't have done it if I was Prime Minister? And then he followed it up by saying, I had worries. And I spoke to the then Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, about those worries as well. I mean, it was incredibly frank when the Prime Minister is in such peril for a Cabinet Minister to come on and say that. But I think what's even more makes this even more important is that Ed Miliband isn't just any Cabinet Minister. For a lot of disgruntled Labour backbenchers, they sort of see Ed Miliband as representing this kind of ideological flank in the government that is too often eclipsed by realpolitik and bland process. All the new Labour stuff that they believe has got the government into so much trouble, not least on the Mandelson fiasco. So I think the fact that you've got Ed Miliband coming out and saying this at a time when people in Labour are looking at people like Ed Miliband, bundling them up with people like Angela Rayner and Andy Burnham and going, maybe we should have a more overtly left-wing ideological approach to government that these guys represent. The fact that he is saying that and the fact that he feels politically emboldened enough to say it is really, really significant.
Rob, it's interesting when you were saying there that you could spot the moment when he kind of shifted from the lines to take, because I don't think it's, we saw it on TV, it's on camera, so I don't think this is any secrets, but he had notes in front of him, like which is probably from number 10, because look, if we're on his energy brief, you might disagree with him on the policy, but he is across this stuff, right? He is all over it. And you did, I think, get a bit of a shift to the interview when he was trying to make the point that, look, Ollie Robbins himself said the appointment wasn't rushed. And I kind of pushed back on him on that. And I think you could almost sense him being like, OK, right, I'm actually just going to say what I think on this, right? And like you say, because of who Ed Miliband is, because of the pressure that Keir Starmer is under and his leadership, it is a moment of peril for him, right? It really is.
And I thought it was even more fascinating that he invoked his time as leader as well. 2010, when he was drawing these distinctions with New Labour and with people like Peter Mandelson in clear terms. That was the whole point of 2010 to 2015 Ed Miliband. Like, it didn't work, right? But I don't think that sort of flavour of Ed Miliband has ever quite faded for many in the Labour Party. They still sort of see him as representing a kind of anti-New Labour, anti-Mandelson kind of zeal, if you like. Yeah, I thought it was really, really significant, and it's kind of one of those interviews that, depending on what happens in the months ahead, you might kind of look back on and go, well, that was where we first saw the rumblings.
Which is also mad that we're talking about this 10 days before the locals.
Oh, my goodness.
And you wondered if someone's going to turn, will they turn, when will it be a slight turn? I was, there's a lot of hurdles for the Prime Minister to come.
I think that's the real risk of this, is it just sort of depletes the Prime Minister's political credibility and energy. After a month, actually, where I don't think his premiership had necessarily been improving, but it has at least stabilised.
It has stabilised.
Now it's gone sort of off the deep end again, and I think combined with what could be coming on May the 7th, that could be pretty bad.
Well, of course, all to come at 9 a.m. So Ollie Robbins, Rob, for now, thank you very much. And we'll also be speaking to political editor Beth Rigby, and executive editor of Politico, and co-hosts of Politics, Sam and Anne's Anne McElvoy. That's all coming up later this hour as we build up to Ollie Robbins at 9 a.m.
Cancel your plans. Don't go anywhere. It's going to be very, very interesting indeed.
Let's turn to developments in the Middle East now as the fragile ceasefire between Iran and the US approaches its expiry date. Well, the US Vice President is expected to travel to Pakistan today for another round of peace negotiations, but Iran has not yet confirmed whether it'll send a team to attend the talks.
Well, let's bring in Cordelia Lynch, who's in Pakistan's capital, Islamabad, for us this morning. Cordelia, what's your read on the talks? Is Iran going to show up?
I think, Sophie, with every hour, they look more likely, more hopeful, but there are no guarantees. The messaging from Iran is that they don't want to be pressured, that they feel like America is trying to force them to surrender, and they are not willing to. The lead negotiator, the parliamentary speaker, has said that they have new cards for the battlefield if fighting resumes. But it's worth having a think about the sort of logistics of travel and the time differences between the participating nations. You've got the Vice President, J.D. Vance, who signalled he will be travelling to Islamabad today. They're hopeful talks will take place tomorrow. So far, no cast iron commitment from Iran whatsoever, but it is only a 4-hour flight to get here, and I think they really want to hold on to their negotiating power. And there's some rhetorical bluster as well, but there's also some very meaningful points of conflict when it comes to negotiating. When the talks took place before, 21 hours long, ended without a deal, we heard Iran saying that America had pressured them to hand over their enriched uranium, and that is just a red line for them. But there is kind of one central part to all of these talks that people are showing some willing to at least continue to discuss, and that, of course, is the Strait of Hormuz and the stranglehold that is under at the moment that's caused this big kind of explosion in energy prices, that's caused an energy crisis. It is in both parties' interest to continue speaking about that, at least. Now, in terms of what Donald Trump is saying, there are some leaks, some suggestion that he's holding it in his pocket, that he may even come to Islamabad if a deal is reached, that he's optimistic that one could be reached in the next few days. But at the heart of the kind of problem with Iran is that there's a bit of an ideological gulf between some of the more pragmatic negotiators and some of the more hardline elements. And I think it's whether they can get together and agree, not just internally, but of course in their conversations with the Americans as well. It feels, from my perspective right now, the most possible, most hopeful scenario is that we see the ceasefire extended. At the moment, Donald Trump's suggesting that won't happen. But I don't think anyone's got sky-high expectations. They just want to make sure everybody gets here and at least sits in the same room and begins to discuss how they get out of this war. Certainly America is desperate right now for an off-ramp.
Cordelia, as always, thanks so much. A big couple of days ahead in Islamabad for sure. We're going to return now to our top story here. And of course, Ollie Robbins, as we've been talking about, will lay out the timeline and the details as he sees them in and around Lord Mandelson's fated appointment, of course, to ambassador to the US. That starts at 9 a.m. We had the Prime Minister's version of events yesterday. Let's talk about it all now to Lord Butler, the former Cabinet Secretary and head of the Civil Service, serving a distinguished career across multiple Prime Ministers. Lord Butler, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
I guess the first question I have on this is the extent to which, even on such a high-profile issue where there might be outright security vetting information presented to a civil servant, is the civil servant ultimate job to do what his elected boss wants him to do?
Well, that's what civil servants try to do. You try to support the government in trying to achieving what their policies are. So, yes, civil servants always try to help.
And in that regard, do you understand why Ollie Robbins allowed this vetting decision, which clearly advised against the appointment of Lord Mandelson, to slip under the carpet because he'd already been appointed to the role?
Yes, I think that Ollie Robbins was in an impossible position, really. The appointment had been made and announced, and so he was doing what he could to enable the government to go ahead with it. He got this advice, it was only advice, from security vetting that there were risks about Peter Mandelson, but he took it upon himself to say, well, I can give him the clearance and we'll put such safeguards as we can in place.
That said, there's a gap between not telling the Prime Minister about this information and reversing the appointment. And clearly the Prime Minister feels he should have been given the information. I think you add to that there were multiple moments where presumably Sir Ollie Robinson must have paused and thought, should I now tell the Prime Minister about this? The fact that the Prime Minister only learnt about it last week is also incredibly striking.
Well, I don't take a view on whether the law allowed Ollie Robbins to tell the Prime Minister. Ollie Robbins took the view that the 2010 Act prevented him from doing it. But leave that aside. Let us just suppose that he had told the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has said that if he had been told, he wouldn't have gone ahead with the appointment. But the appointment had been announced. And so he would have then said, no, I'm revoking the announcement because I've been told that Mandelson is a security risk. Now, what would that have done to Mandelson to be publicly told, the public to be told that he was a security risk? And what would it have done to our relations with the Americans? It would have been terrible. So I don't think that, I think that Ollie Robbins really had to take the decision that he did take.
But Lord Butler, surely it would have been less terrible than what's unfolded.
Well, no. I think it would have been terrible then. And what Robbins was doing was doing what he could to help the government achieve what the government wanted. I would like to make clear that I've had no contact whatever with Ollie Robbins. I'm not speaking his line. I don't know what he's going to say. I'm really just giving you what my view is, that Ollie Robbins has been sacked for doing his best to do what the government wanted.
I wanted to pick up on a slightly separate point. This letter from Simon Case to the Prime Minister that suggested if you're going to go down the political appointment route rather than the civil service appointment route, you should give us your favourite pick as soon as possible so security vetting can take place before the appointment is announced or not. When you see civil servants giving politicians bits of advice like that, is it usually explicit, or is it fair to say that there's lots of bits of advice that fly around and it's not necessarily always taken as explicit?
Well, it is explicit, and I think that Simon Case's advice was extremely wise and extremely good. I think, a lot of the trouble in this matter has come because the announcement of the appointment was made and the King's consent obtained before the positive vetting had taken place.
Additionally, what do you feel like the mood is like in the civil service right now? I mean, I know you haven't spoken to Ollie Robbins, but I wonder if you've spoken to other former colleagues when you look at, I guess, the scale of headcount change, even just cabinet secretary level, for example. We mentioned Simon Case there, Chris Wormald onto Antonio Romeo.
I haven't spoken to anybody within the civil service since this story broke. I've spoken to some of my former colleagues, a lot of whom, I think the majority of whom, take the same view as I do, which was that Ollie Robbins was trying to serve the government as best he could. He had to take on himself the risk of giving Mandelson security clearance, and he's been done a grave misjustice.
Sum it up for us, Lord Butler. How much trouble should the Prime Minister be in for all of this?
Well, I should first of all say I hope that the Prime Minister does not resign. I don't think it's a good moment in the country for there to be a change of Prime Minister. But having said that, I think he has made a very serious misjudgment. I think he made a misjudgment in appointing Peter Mandelson, which he himself acknowledges. But I think that landing this on officials, and particularly on Ollie Robbins, is a grave injustice, and that is a further serious mistake.
Lord Butler, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Of course, we'll be taking Sir Ollie Robbins live at 9 a.m. We just got pictures of Darren Jones approaching Downing Street for Cabinet. This is, of course, where they're going to be during the evidence. Are they going to watch it together, do we think?
Can you imagine? I mean, it's going to be... They're going to have the phones out, aren't they? Surely.
I think they're going to be saying to Ed Miliband as he comes in, what was that?
I mean, they're going to be...
Or maybe they'll all say, well done, Ed. Prime Minister, take notice.
They're all going to be looking around the cabinet table, aren't they, working out what's in each other's minds. I mean, it's a huge day. It's a huge day for Ollie Robbins, of course, but for Keir Starmer and his leadership, it really does feel like one of those kind of make or break days for the Prime Minister.
Now, well, let's talk about a policy change. Schools in England will be forced to ban mobile phones following a surprise U-turn from the government. At the moment, there's guidance to say phones shouldn't be allowed, but it's just guidance and head teachers don't have to follow it.
It's an interesting one to slip out. This was a vote last night in the Lords who have really done the running on trying to change the government's policy when it comes to social media, bans from under 16, that kind of thing. And there was a surprise announcement by the Skills Minister, Jackie Smith, who said that actually now MPs are going to be voting this week on amending the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill, and the government is backing a change in policy, so it's a legal requirement to ban phones. It's a U-turn, and I think it's something we'll be talking about a lot more today if it wasn't for Peter Mandelson.
Well, the issue of social media, of course, a live topic for the government, as Sophie has been saying, we have got Mickey Carroll speaking to Liz Kendall about it all.
It's no secret that the government's planning to make some very big changes to how young people live online. The question is, who's influencing the changes that they'll make? Tech executives from companies like Roblox, Snapchat, TikTok, Meta have all been hauled in front of MPs 3 times in the last 2 months alone to give evidence on different aspects of online harm. This morning, they're giving evidence on screen time and the impact too much phone use can have on young people. There are campaigners who say that those companies have a vested interest in watering down the government's more dramatic plans to protect young people online, things like blocking all under 16s from social media. But the Technology Secretary, speaking to me here outside a conference in Sussex on the childhood in the age of AI, says she's relying on the government's public consultation on the issue that's already attracted more than 50,000 responses to make a decision. But no matter what, there'll be drastic changes brought in, maybe even by the end of the year.
Of course, we talk to those companies, but we also want to say to them, we had a pretty blunt conversation, myself and the Prime Minister, with the companies just last week to say, what more are you going to do? Because you say you're making these changes, but parents don't feel it's enough. So we had a pretty honest conversation about it, and I'm sure MPs will continue to take evidence for them too.
But this isn't just a societal problem. This kind of content is banned on all major tech platforms. And the people trying to stop it from spreading say now that they need help. So I asked the Technology Secretary what she's planning to do about it.
It's precisely because we want and need to do more that we're having this very short, sharp consultation, that we'll bring forward our proposals before the summer. And we've already taken the power to implement our decision. And I intend to do that by the end of the year.
Mickey Carroll speaking to Liz Kendall there. Let's have a look at the latest unemployment data, which dropped an hour or so ago. Well, it was an unexpected drop in unemployment, sitting at its lowest point now since the summer of last year. So the forecast had been for it to come in at 5.2%, but it came in at 4.9% in the 3 months to February. Let's have a look at the youth unemployment now, please, as well. And that recorded a modest drop after surging to 16%, but is still pretty high at 15.8%. And the numbers ultimately coming in better than expected.
How much do you think the war is going to impact all this?
I don't think it'll change unemployment in the short term. I don't think you've seen companies in the first month of the war have to lay people off. I think it's going to change the inflation picture very immediately, as we've already seen when you fill up with diesel or petrol. That feeds through much quicker. Inflation data, by the way, tomorrow. So that'll be interesting to watch where that was before the start.
Now, we've got a pretty staggering statistic to bring you now, because at least 2 school-age children die every month from knife injuries in England.
New studies using medical, social care and police data have found most deaths are the result of a single stab wound, with 90% of the victims boys.
We're going to talk about this a bit more now. Barnaby's joining us. To be honest, the thing that really breaks my heart there is a single stab wound. I mean, I'm not an expert in these things, but if a single stab wound can be not an intent to kill somebody, right? You know, it can be something that goes wrong. So, like, you carry a knife and it obviously raises the chances of this happening. But I guess it just shows the devastating impact that these weapons can have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think these statistics are staggering, as you just said. And what this research has done is it's allowed us to paint a bit of a picture as to what some of the metrics are that can increase the risk of a young person being killed by a knife in the UK. So these researchers analysed 145 deaths over a 5-year period between 2019 and 2024. As you said, they found that 90% of those victims were men, and they found that the average age of those children, and they are children who have died, was 14 years and 4 months, so really, really young. In terms of ethnicity, the researchers found that a third of those victims were white children and a third were black children. However, if we look at those statistics as a percentage of the wider population, the researchers found that black children were some 13 times more likely to suffer a fatal stab wound in the UK than their white counterparts. And crucially, this research found that 75% of young people who'd been killed by a knife were from areas with the highest levels of poverty in England. And I think that is really, really key. And there were key findings in this research on how home life can increase the risk to young people, the likelihood of them being killed by a knife. For example, the research found that domestic violence had been experienced by 57% of people who died. A quarter had lived with an adult with a mental illness. 37% had experienced physical abuse. And this, I thought, was really interesting. The research looked at 53 school-aged children, and that found that almost half of them had been excluded from school for periods prior to their deaths. And the report found that most children impacted had been known to statutory authorities. So it's clear there's a role for schools and for these different agencies to play in bringing these numbers down.
I'm so interested that, from listening to what you just said there, the biggest indicator for this is domestic violence, 57%, more than half. And if you read up on any of the stuff or talk to people in the police, they will say that being a victim of crime, being a criminal yourself, being someone who perpetrates violent crime, the biggest factor in this is witnessing domestic violence in the house. So that's why it's so important to tackle this as an issue as well. It's such a key thing. I think it's not part of our debate nearly as much as it should be.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's really come through in the research, is that a lot of these children who have been killed by a knife have grown up in environments where they have witnessed violence. And so that's definitely come through. I mean, other statistics, for example, 68% of these children who have died had documented involvement with illegal substances. So there are all sorts of sort of different metrics that can increase the likelihood of a young person being killed by a knife. And so dealing with that is about dealing with all of those other things.
Barnaby, great stuff, thank you. Now, we just wanted to bring you some pictures from New York overnight. 20 years on from the groundbreaking Devil Wears Prada film, the sequel has premiered. Stars of the film from Meryl Streep, Anne Hathaway, Emily Blunt, Stanley Tucci. God, what a great cast. We're out in force. The London premiere is later this week. The Devil Wears Prada 2 comes out next month. We've discussed this. Neither of us saw the original, which is quite bad. Our production team is, over the moon excited. And I've kind of started to get the bug a bit.
Are you going to watch the first one?
I guess someone tell me, do I need to watch the first one to watch the second one? Or is you apparently, yes, apparently I do. So I'm not sure I got the energy to watch 2. I've got the bug enough to watch one of them.
Doesn't sound like he's going to watch it, don't you think? Doesn't sound like it to me. I'm not going to watch it.
I'm more likely to watch this than to read Jane Austen. For viewers of both hours of the show.
Well, why don't I read Pride and Prejudice and you can watch Devil Wears Prada?
I'd rather read, a James Bond novel, though. Or
fair.
Do neither.
Also fair.
Or a business book, actually.
You can read about the new Apple CEO, maybe.
Well, I know quite a lot about him already. Oh, the new one, yeah. No, the new one, yeah, I should.
Yeah,
don't know anything about him. I'd like to interview him.
If
Apple's comms team is watching. Or Tim Cook, be great. Outgoing or incoming. Be invited.
The seat is here. 100 years on since the birth of Queen Elizabeth II. We're going to be talking about that next and the tribute that's been paid by her son, the King.
With respect, Minister, answer the question. It's you. Hello and welcome. I'm Cathy Newman. So could the outcome of these elections be manipulated? New me, new show, new furniture. Hard news needs a hard chair. I feel like I'm in therapy. Oh, there's room for two on this one. Do you think people will take me seriously with my feet up?
Sorry, madam, but we're closing now.
Oh, sorry. Sofa sorted. Let's get this show on the road.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back.
Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist...
Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
Welcome back. Today marks 100 years since the birth of Queen Elizabeth II, and the King has released a special tribute to his mother.
It's a busy day for the royals. There's lots of events taking place to mark the occasion. Let's first of all, shall we take a listen to some of what King Charles had to say?
Much about the times we now live in, I suspect, may have troubled her deeply. But I take heart from her belief that goodness will always prevail and that a brighter dawn is never far from the horizon. For, as a young Princess Elizabeth put it in her first ever public broadcast, aged just 14, we can each play our part to make the world of tomorrow a better and happier place. It is a belief which I share with all my heart.
We can speak to royal commentator Jenny Bond now. Jenny, very good morning. Great to have you back. My first question on this is the King saying that the Queen would be somewhat dismayed by the times. I mean, the times haven't changed that much in the last 5 or so years, have they?
Well, I think the world is in turmoil at the moment, as we keep on reporting. And I think you can draw what inference you want from that sentence, but it is the standout sentence of the tribute. I think the King is speaking here pretty much as head of state and as a son with great sadness in his voice. And I think with the palace say you can deduce what you want from that sentence, and that the tribute speaks for itself. But obviously everyone's going to think not only about the turmoil of the Iran war and the cost of living, but also perhaps it is a good thing that she didn't live to see her second son so disgraced, now reduced to Mr. Mountbatten Windsor and living virtually in exile. Perhaps it's good that she didn't have to suffer the distress of seeing both her son and her granddaughter-in-law diagnosed with cancer. Perhaps it's good that she is no longer here to see the continuing rift with Harry and Meghan. All of those distressed her greatly in the last couple of years of her life, apart from the cancer diagnosis she didn't know about. So perhaps there is a little reference to that.
Yeah, you talked there about the turmoil in the family as well. This is the thing with the royal family, I guess, isn't it? It's so difficult when you're talking about family relationships. Like Andrew was her son, or, you know, obviously, so someone that she loved very, very deeply. Do you think that the late Queen's reputation has been impacted by the way that she dealt with her son, Andrew?
It has to an extent, because the questions, as we all know, have been asked. Did she turn a blind eye to his faults and his failings? Very difficult situation for a mother. And I always say on this, any parent defends their child. If your child comes to you, even an adult child, and says, look, I'm being accused of these things, absolutely, I did not do it, then you're probably going to defend your son or your daughter. And I think that's what she did. But in this statement, largely, it is about her sense of constancy and loyalty and devotion to this country. And I think in this, the King comes across as head of state, speaking about this wonderful monarch who had such longevity that she was there for all of our lives. And also, I think he very much wants to point to hope for the future, for peace, and the happier, brighter world that she spoke of when she was just 14. In the war, she made her first broadcast, as he refers to here. And she was just 14 and said, surely we can all work towards a happier, brighter place. And that's what he hopes we can all do now. Maybe a forlorn hope, I don't know, but it is worthwhile saying, perhaps.
Jenny, I wanted to look ahead to the state visit to the US next week. And I guess your scale of surprise or not, that not only it's going ahead despite all the obvious tensions, but it's big. It's 4 days. There's an awful lot to it. This isn't just a gosh, well, we can't wriggle out of it, so I'll have to go and show face to President Trump. They are going all guns blazing on both sides.
Well, they are, but it is very controlled, this one. There's going to be very little opportunity for President Trump to go off-piste, though he probably always will find a way. But he does respect the royal family. He has a certain, he says, a friendship with the King. No one's going to envy the King and Queen this task. And perhaps it's a good thing the Queen is not having to see her son do this, though she would have carried out with aplomb. My goodness, she carried out so many state visits and incoming state visits with people of incredible disrepute. I mean, from Ceausescu, she hid in the garden behind a tree so that you didn't have to see him in the morning after the state dinner. There's all sorts of examples like that. So I don't think she'd envy him the task, but both she and he will carry it out with the diplomatic skills that they've earned and learned over decades of doing this sort of thing.
Yeah, can I talk to you about the King, about King Charles? Because look, I think it's fair to say there were, I guess, a few doubts with him coming in after the reign of his mum. But most people seem to think he's actually done a very good job in the circumstances. And we were talking about the Queen and Andrew. How do you think she would have felt about her eldest son, Charles? Do you think she would have been proud by how he's conducted himself as monarch?
I think she would, yes. I think it was an incredibly smooth transition, but then he's been assailed by so many problems, domestically, health-wise, and internationally as well. But I think most people anyway, feel that he has carried out a good job. And that the rain is going as smoothly as possible. And it's a steady hand at the tiller, which she was as well. I mean, honestly, with the political turmoil we live through these days and is going on even today, with Keir Starmer and with Ollie Robbins giving evidence today. I mean, we live in a total state of flux about who's in charge of this country, the succession of different prime ministers, and I think that's where we see the constancy that he was talking about in his tribute of a monarchy, just as a backbone, something steady holding this ship together. And I think that's what people valued about her and perhaps are beginning to value about him.
Jenny, just to wrap up, I wanted to ask you what you think the King might think of the Prime Minister's current predicament, in particular because so much of it stems from the appointment of US ambassador. Now, all these appointments are obviously political choices, even if they're in the name of the King, but I feel like ambassador to the US is slightly more relevant that it's in the King's name. Do you think he'll be annoyed with all that's unfolded in and around that appointment, or does it not really get up to his radar in that same way?
Oh, well, I think he will be dismayed by all that has transpired from that, because, once again, there is this link to Epstein, and we all know that the Andrew link to Epstein. So it just keeps those headlines bubbling along. But more than that, I think he will feel for the Prime Minister, actually, and the great difficulties in. I would imagine the two men have talked about it. These private meetings they have every week, albeit by telephone or in person, are very important to the Prime Minister of the day. So many Prime Ministers have gone on record as saying that. You know, Tony Blair once said, there are only two people I can tell everything to, and one's the wife, the other's the Queen. So it may be that Charles has had the opportunity to offer some kind of advice, guidance, and listened to the Prime Minister's dilemma. It's a very sticky situation for Keir Starmer, as we all know. And I think perhaps it might have been some kind of relief for him to have someone to talk to about it.
Jenny, great stuff. Always a pleasure.